Welcome to How to Not Be a Screw-Up, a blunt and honest discussion about how to change your life for the better. My name is Stephen Burns.
And I'm Brian Costello, and Steve and I have been working as coaches and therapists and trainers in the world of mental health for over 20 years.
So if you felt like your life is out of control and you don't know why you're doing the things that you do, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to How to Not Be a Screw-Up, a blunt and honest discussion about how to change your life for the better. My name is Stephen Burns and I'm here with my buddy Brian Costello. How the heck are you?
Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever it is that you're listening to this.
Could be any time zone, really.
Could be any. Look at this. This is a bland background that doesn't give you any clue as to where we are and when we are.
We're in an undisclosed location somewhere in Glasgow. I shouldn't have said that. I've just given away
just giving it away. Well, technically speaking, we're in Renfrew. But anyway, that's for another thing.
The spies will be after us. So.
The paparazzi will be waiting outside for us. We know how it's like. It's hard life.
Indeed. So what we're going to talk about today, Brian, I think we're going to talk about self-sabotage. That whole thing where you take 2 steps forward and then it feels like you take 1,000,001 steps back. It's just super frustrating. And it can show up in lots of different ways in our life, can't it? And I think most people at some stage experience self-sabotage, don't they? Some kind of inner conflict. But sometimes people can really be affected by it and it can almost like take over their life. So what are your sort of opening thoughts on self-sabotage? How does it tend to show up in people's lives?
I think as well, though, do you not think, mate? I think that for many people, I think that because they, and this is going to sound terribly patronising actually, as it's about to come out of my mouth, I'm like, oh no, this is going to be recorded, but it's not meant to, and I promise I'm going to explain what we mean. I think because of a lack of education about how our minds work, I think a lot of people live in this thought that they are self-sabotaging all the time. I definitely know when I was younger, I couldn't work out why my life wasn't going the directions that I wanted to go in. Why was it that I was constantly late for work? I now understand, by the way, that's ADHD, but potentially, I mean, that's one part of it. I was also just a lazy bugger that sometimes when you wake up with a hangover on a Saturday morning, the thought of going to McDonald's at 8 o'clock in the morning wasn't exactly enticing. But I think in general life these days, I think a lot of people think that because of the way that mental health is sold, if you like, and talked about, that every mental health problem is a type of self-sabotage. You know, that I can't find the relationship that I want because I'm self-sabotaging, or social anxiety, which I know is a huge part of that you worked on in a part of your career, you know, it's such a massive thing for people now of, oh no, I'm socially anxious, so why am I like that? I want to go to the gig, or I want to be able to go out and socialise, or I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but I can't because of my anxiety. And this idea that our mind is against us, you know, that somehow we are locked in some life battle, which Steve and I are going to point out, by the way, as this podcast goes on, that is not true. That is not what's actually happening, even though you might genuinely be listening or watching this just now thinking, that is exactly what's happening, Brian. It is not what's happening. And it's one of my greatest joys as a therapist and as a mental health person to talk to people about what we are going to talk about today, to show them that they are not doing what they think they are. They are not messing their lives up in the way that they think they are. It's not self-sabotage. It's something else. But I'll leave that as
that sounds very
teaser.
Very mysterious. I like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll come back to that later.
Indeed. I think it can show up in a lot of ways, can't it? I think like one of the ways that you often see is indecision.
Yep.
Where like people like they want something, they want to make a decision for something, but for some reason they just can't do it. There's a part of them wants one thing, but a part of them wants something else. So they end up just stuck in this funny middle ground, don't they, where they end up just doing nothing. And the interesting thing is, if you're doing nothing, you are still making a decision. You're making a decision to do nothing, which is a wee bit of a paradox. That's the first fancy word for... In fact, I think you said a fancy word in the beginning.
I've already used a fancy word today already. We should do some sort of syllable count, you know, like who gets the biggest those syllable words. We should do like kind of through the podcast.
Like how to not screw your life up countdown edition.
Exactly.
That'd be pretty cool. So, so I think indecision's quite a big thing. You see this a lot. I guess the classic could be in relationships, you know, should I stay or should I go? Or if you're in a...
Sorry, just reminded me of the Clash.
Don't give up your day job as a mental health person that you described yourself a moment ago, which is quite interesting. So, it's true, isn't it? Or even in a job that you maybe don't like, but you're doing it for financial reasons, and we all need security, of course. But, part of you wants to leave and part of you wants to stay, and we end up in this kind of funny middle ground, and we end up staying for 20 years anyway. Yep. And so we are making a decision to stay. I think for me, one of the big areas that it can often show up is destructive behaviours. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, because a lot of the time when people are like displaying these destructive behaviours, it looks like they're just totally out of control on the surface.
Yep.
But usually there's something going on beneath the surface, isn't there? So what are your thoughts on destructive behaviours?
Yeah, that's it. I was thinking that just as you were talking there about part of me this, part of me that, and that sort of indecision. And the other thing, that's what I was thinking of, is people who just do stuff and then go, why did I do that? I didn't want to drink too much, or I didn't want to go out and get mad with it again, or I didn't want to spend all that money, or I didn't want to, whatever it was, why did I do that? And I think those destructive behaviours are such a key part of understanding, or starting to see them as non-destructive behaviours and see them for their real intention. But at the time, why did I do that? I mean, I remember, she's going to come up, I think, a lot in this podcast, but my wife has a story that, which I've got to admit I should hang my head for. But I went out, so I could actually tell you, May the 24th, 2004, it would have been. And there was a football match on where a certain player who was having his last game, and I went out to the pub with my little brother with the instruction to come home sensible. Now, there's a couple of key things I have to put in here, Steve, is that I had also just given up smoking at this time, and smoking and having a couple of pints was obviously a tied-in thing at that time. And I went out with my little brother. The reason I can tell you the date is because it just so happened to also be my first wedding anniversary. Well,
okay. Can see where this story's going.
Yeah. I definitely wanted to come home. We had a whole plan. We were going to have a Chinese. We were going to celebrate and have our first wedding anniversary. Well, my wife says she heard me come off the bus before she saw me, because I came off singing songs. And my wife's first wedding anniversary was spent with me asleep on the bathroom floor, and her and my wee brother had a Chinese together.
What more does she want? I mean, that's just like pure romance, surely.
Absolutely. Now, I remember being so ashamed of myself after, and I know that's a big word, but genuinely I was like so like embarrassed by everything that happened. But that wasn't the only time that type of thing happened. And it really took a lot of me reflecting on myself and starting to understand the motivations for those destructive behaviours as to why that thing kept on happening. That, by the way, is exactly the same thing as I talked about with the McDonald's thing. You know, when I worked in bars and pubs and restaurants, the number of times I'd show up late or sometimes not show up at all, I must have been a king-size pain in the arse. I get sacked from jobs for not showing up, and because I was out or I'd just ended up, and you look at it, and I remember even at the time going, why am I doing this? But at that time, I had no knowledge of what was actually going on, no knowledge of how my mind worked. So for me, these things were just, as you say, they were just destructive behaviours. Like, why would I possibly make these decisions when surely they were and not in my own best interest? So surely it must be self-sabotage.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because it's a slightly different example, but sorry, I've just got a picture of you in the bath, like with,
I didn't even make the bath. I was just lying in the bathroom floor.
With a rose in your teeth for some reason, because it was
the first anniversary.
Yeah,
I never even thought of that.
That would have made up for it.
Yeah,
surely. It would have made up for all the drunken debauchery, no problem whatsoever. Just stick a rose in your mouth and you'd have been fine. See?
I mean, I don't know who's going to be listening to this, and it might not make sense, but what was Henrik's last game?
Well, it's true.
You know,
so you've just outed yourself. If people watching this in Glasgow, 50% are going to love us and 50% are going to hate us. That's true. We've
just lost a whole heap of readership.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Absolutely.
But there we go. So, Yeah, no, I mean, I think it can show up in lots of different ways, can't it? Like being drunk and lying in your bath with a rose. You've now got a rose.
I've now got a rose.
So
fine. I'm going to say to Sheena, she's just forgotten the rose. I'm going to gaslight her into thinking I had a rose and it was much more romantic.
Sounds like a surefire good relationship tactic there, Brian.
Every relationship needs a tiny bit of gaslight.
Definitely not, by the way. So
just delete that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, for me, I think it kind of, one of the big areas it shows up for me is in relationships. Now, not so much now, but so for me, one of the things that I value the most, so the two things I value the most are connection and freedom.
Yep.
So I love, connection. I love spending time with people and having fun and it's just great. I'm a real people person, but at the same time, I do enjoy doing the things I want to do and enjoying that sense of freedom. So that tends to be a wee bit of an issue in a relationship.
It's a contradictory set of values, isn't it? I want connection and I also want freedom.
It seems to be.
I know you make it work, right enough, but
yeah. So it kind of like what was often happening for me was when I was getting into a relationship, I was really enjoying the connection. I was getting on with the person, but then it started to totally freak me out, and there was always a moment where it was kind of like, oh, what's going on here? and it was basically because I was losing, or it was, I perceived that I was losing freedom. So I felt like it was a battle between these two really important things in my life. But I guess, and we'll come on to this later on in this episode, is that they don't necessarily have to fight against each other. Exactly. You can actually create a space where the two of them coexist. But it certainly didn't feel like that for me for a long time. It still is an issue to a certain extent, nowhere near as bad as what it used to be. But because it was these kind of two opposing or seemingly opposing forces that were fighting against each other. I think I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but another area where self-sabotage can show up is with our goals as well. When we're going after something that we want, where we do our kind of like if you like to goal set, some people like to
do a plan.
They do a plan, or do like a journal and write down some of the things that they want to achieve. And then they go for it, but then they notice that they're doing a bunch of stuff that's actually taking them in the complete opposite direction. It's almost like, I call these your yes but goals, where you're like, yeah, I'd love to do that, but there's a whole list of reasons why you feel that you can't do it. So you end up almost like sabotaging from the background. And there's some very big butts out there. You don't have a big butt. I'm looking at it just now. Your butt is,
I go to the gym.
Definitely fine, but I think it's what we see after the butt is often the thing that holds us back. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
And there's a type of another type of therapy that I know you know of called transactional analysis, and they actually have they have things called injunctions. And by the way, I know some transactional analysis who, when they listen to this episode, are going to turn around and go, oh, you got that wrong. But anyway, I'm going to try my best. But injunctions, and that's what they would call that, a yes but injunction, that actually you can live your whole life with a yes but. And I think it's such a destructive thing when it's happening, like this is what I want but, or this is where I'm going but. I think the challenge is, quite often people don't realise why they want their goals, and then we come into more linguistics here. We're going to get into more words like should. So I'm doing this because I think I should do it. Like I should be, I don't know, going on holiday 3 times a year. I should be at that place and that want for that next thing, and not realising. And I think this kind of comes back. So about to say there is, you don't realise, because people, I think, sometimes don't listen to what they're saying. That if, as we get through this episode, that if people listen back to what you just talked about, connection versus freedom, you start to get into this idea of the real reasons behind what it is that's going on. In fact, I know I've taken this in a tangent, but I think it's important. At the time when you were having those battles between connection and freedom, now you've done so much mind stuff, you get that. What did it feel like at the time? You must have had a yes but. Like, I want to have this relationship, but Is that what it felt like? I bet you weren't sitting to yourself going, well, actually what it is, I want freedom. It must have been times when you thought, I'm screwing this relationship up and I can't work out why, but I feel trapped or I feel stuck, or it wouldn't have probably been the word freedom you would have used. I imagine it would have been.
I feel like I'm at the start of a therapy session.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get my book out.
Are you charging me for this? I just want to make that clear from the
clock has begun.
Friends rates.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It was like there was always a point. Like it started off great. It started off with great intentions, and then I was really enjoying it. And then there was a point where I suddenly realised, or I thought that, oh, this means that I'm now losing freedom. And it was a very confusing point.
Yeah.
It was definitely a junction. You're right. It was just a moment where it was like, oh, wow, I don't know what I'm doing here, and it was super, super confusing because I was trying to like. I don't know. I was trying to have two things that appeared to be competing against each other.
Yep.
And it was like I don't know how to get out of this. So the way out of it was to always end the relationship. I reached a point
wasn't
where
always what you maybe wanted to do at the time, or were confused as to why that felt like it was your only way to go.
And I even had a discussion with one of my girlfriends at the time, and like it was like it was just a bizarre discussion because it made sense to me, but it didn't really seem to make much sense to her. But yeah, it was a really weird dynamic that was going on. But I think at the heart of it was definitely that I was trying to. There was these two opposing forces that don't necessarily have to be against each other, but I'd set the game up in a way where they were against each other.
I love that. Set the game up. I love that. That's an interesting thing. I talk about that. I use an example quite often, which is semi-autobiographical. It was never quite this bad, but of the confusion that can happen when, again, you don't understand what's going on. And I use this thing of somebody being invited to like a staff night out. So you're in your work and you get the email round that says, there's a staff night out, and actually you quite like going on nights out. So your first impression when that email arrives is to go, oh, brilliant, I'm going to go on this night out. But immediately followed by this anxiety that then comes in the background about, either what am I going to wear, who's going to be there. Now, at this point, because the night out's quite far away, that anxiety is quite quiet, but it's there. There's more excitement. But as it gets closer and closer, that anxiety begins to grow. And the anxiety starts to basically push you in a way to not want to go on the night out. So you start to think, I'm just not going to go. I'm just not going to go because it's too difficult. Now, this anxiety could be anything from, I normally use the example of being judged. I'm worried that people are going to judge me. So that hides itself, though. That could hide itself in, I've got nothing to wear, or I don't know who I'm going to speak to, or people don't like me, or there's a number of ways that we can use this, people are going to judge me. But you still do want to go. There's another side of you going, but these people are my friends. So eventually you push yourself into going to this night out, and you steel yourself and you go, it's going to be fine. I'm just going to go in and it's going to be okay. And then you get into the venue where this thing is happening and where this night out is happening. Now, at this point, I normally talk about how there's lots of different ways that this could go, because for this person, one way that they could go is now to drink away their anxiety. So they could get really drunk really quickly and then wake up the next morning really embarrassed and ashamed, like me with my rose in my teeth now, apparently, and go, oh no, I'm never going to do that again. And then the cycle actually reinforces itself. But one of the other ways is to go, right, it never goes away. And then it's this push to leave. So once you're in, it's like, right, well, you're here now. And then you want to leave. But then as soon as you leave, then that same voice that was just challenging you for wanting to get out wants to go back in because it's worried that you're being judged because you left early, and there's like no escape. It's like this horrible cycle where I went because I was worried that people would judge me if I didn't go. Then I was there, I worried about people judging me because I was there. And then when I left, I worried about people because I was leaving early, that now everybody was talking about me. This must be self-sabotage, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly, total catch-22.
On multiple levels. And yeah, I was wondering if that was a real life experience you were describing there. That seemed to be just a wee bit too raw for you. So I'm going into therapist mode.
Yeah, exactly.
Proper Freudian therapist mode there. Yeah, tell me about your childhood.
But that genuinely, I mean, I did say it's semi-autobiographical. My thing was normally the first response. which was go out and find some sort of way to get through that anxiety that normally meant just getting steaming really quickly, or or whatever else it was.
It's a really good point though, because I think it shows how these self-sabotages can end up growing arms and legs, and you can end up actually adding on extra like destructive behaviours and other kind of troublesome emotions on top of it.
That's so true.
When you get down to it, the problem's actually a lot more simple than that, but it's just grown massive arms and legs and become something a little bit different.
If you're enjoying this pod and you want more, then Steve and I have produced a special video series just for you. 6 lessons that you can sign up for right now for totally free.
So if you want to check that out, the link should pop up on the video just now. If you're listening on audio though, we'll include that link in the show notes if you want to check it out. I guess it's like if you look at something like smoking, that's you could say that's a destructive behaviour, isn't it? And most people they don't smoke in order to get cancer, do they? They don't smoke they don't go, this is part of my goal. It's not a great sales point, And even though they stick that on the cigarette packets, and it still doesn't seem to be deterring people, but people, they don't smoke to get gangrene. You don't smoke to be breathless or anything like that. Usually, initially, people smoke to have a sense of belonging. There may be a teenager, and it's the cool people are hanging about. I don't know if teenagers still do that. It's vaping these days, isn't it?
That was exactly why I started smoking. You've just hit exactly why I started smoking at 17, because I thought it was cool
to look cool. Nice. And so did it work? Did you look cool? I don't go. Let's not go there.
I don't ever.
So you've never been part of the cool crowd?
No, okay. Still struggling.
Me too. I feel your pain. And so people don't like smoke to get these negative consequences. They smoke to get positive underlying positive emotions.
Yep.
So initially it's usually a sense of belonging. They want to be part of the cool crowd. They want to connect with people. And then eventually that usually changes. It then becomes relaxation. Usually when you speak to people who smoke or have smoked for a number of years, they'll say, it's just great to have that time out, just to chill out. This is me time. I do it to relax, even though science has shown that smoking cigarettes is going to do the opposite. Absolutely. It's going to increase your stress. But in that moment, they just get that little kind of, I guess, that dopamine rush where they feel like they're getting something good. So I think it's important to realise that, these self-sabotaging behaviours, they can grow arms and legs. They can end up with loads of different destructive behaviours attached to them and various different emotions. They can appear complex, but actually usually there's something very fundamental that's going on. It's where you're attempting to get something good.
And I think that's it. That's your kind of connection freedom, or if you think of that story, that kind of social anxiety, if you like, story that I told, the key to that was about a brain saying, I don't want to be judged. Somebody's mind going, I don't want to be judged. So the ultimate thought of that is protection. So if we follow that out, and this for me and for you, I know is the key to all of these self-sabotage behaviours, is this not understanding what the intention of your behaviour is. So if that person on the night out thing listened to their anxiety, that's not necessarily the right thing to do, as we'll chat about in a wee minute. But if that person listened to the anxiety, then they wouldn't go. So therefore, because they didn't go, therefore they won't be judged. And because they're not judged, therefore they'll be calmer. And all of those different parts of that little story that I told, and every single part of that person's mind was just looking to be safe and to be calm, to protect them. And this is everything that Steve and I are talking about in this episode, is all about understanding intention. You came out of those relationships because you wanted freedom. Yes, there was a bit of a conflict there with the want for connection. When I talked about that story earlier on, that's exactly it. That thought of being in somewhere and being part of the crowd. So my whole thing about drinking, and especially even on that day, was this thing of there was a high in belonging to that group. There was like a buzz in being part of that. And what would happen is, in my head, the thought of the fact that it was my first wedding anniversary was gone, because it was almost like this just sheer buzz of belonging. Now, as soon as I came out of the pub, and I actually got to admit, I can't remember leaving the pub, but I'm sure that when I went and bought the rose that I ended up in the bath with, then the reality of what had happened, or I suppose for me actually, because I can't remember coming out of the pub, it was probably the next day the reality of what had happened and what I'd done came through. And by the way, can I just say, my wife makes a lot of jokes about this. It's me that feels bad about it. She actually now at least finds it quite funny. But I was just caught in this whole thing of being part of, as you say, the cool gang. I was in with the boys. I was never in with the boys in school. So this was, we were all in with it in this pub. It was all good. We were singing songs. We were having a good time. And I didn't know how to switch that off. It was almost like, I would go as far to say I was addicted to that. I wasn't addicted to the alcohol. I was addicted to that buzz. And therefore, once I was in it, I didn't know how to say, stop, I need to go home, until it was too late.
Yeah. I think that kind of touches on what are the underlying issues behind self-sabotage, because I think a lot of these things we've been talking about are very much superficial, very much on the surface. But I think one of the things we did touch on was these, like, anytime we self-sabotage, it's usually because we're attempting to get something emotionally that's important to us. Like, for example, in that moment when you were acting like a total maddie down the town.
Absolutely.
Having some, I don't know, Jaeger bombs, whatever it was that you were doing back then. What was the cool drink back then? I'm not exactly
I was just
sure.
Pints of Tenants.
Just Pints of Tenants.
I wasn't even glamorous.
Snake bite for those
that
of
was
you
what I
the same
started
ages.
with at 17 now.
Oh, wow.
Snake bite and blackcurrant.
That's brutal stuff. And we'll not even get on to the topic of Buckfast. That's just like that's an episode in itself.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, times where you've totally lost it drinking Buckfast, but totally digressed there.
Yeah, exactly. We were about to discuss the underlying issues.
Yeah, when you were really in that moment with your mates, you know, having a drink, you know, you were getting something really positive from it, even though on the surface it was like a self-sabotaging behaviour, because you should have been back, you know, singing your favourite song with Sheena, you know, the song the song that was playing when you first met, when you were at that discotheque and your
first dance at a wedding
met and stuff like that, you know, that mushy stuff that people do in couples.
Absolutely.
But you should have been thinking about that. But really, you were caught up in satisfying that emotion of belonging, and that just took you in a different direction. So I think that's an important thing to realise when it comes to self-sabotaging behaviour, is that it does appear like there's all sorts of chaos on the outside, but actually, if you look beneath the surface, you're attempting to get something good. You're attempting to get something positive. The example I gave earlier on with smoking, people aren't smoking to kill themselves. They're not smoking to get cancer or gangrene. They're smoking to get a sense of belonging or a sense of relaxation, just that time out. For me, when I was self-destructing in a relationship, it appeared bad on the outside, but I was just attempting to get back to freedom. And I think that's an important thing to realise when it comes to self-sabotaging behaviours.
I think one of the big things that people don't understand about how their mind works is that, which I didn't understand back in the day either, and this is what I hinted at right at the beginning of this episode, is this idea that your brain is not just one big... your brain doesn't work on consensus. So your brain is not in there with every bit of it going, right, I want to go there. What your brain is made up of multiple parts, and these multiple parts, which are millions potentially. If you're an adult, probably, but at least in the thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of coping strategies that are running your life. So when I was in that pub, when you were in that relationship, when our person was going on their team night out, you know, that I talked about, it's not all of them that's doing that. It's a part of you. There's a logic to a smoker, isn't there? I mean, you can't avoid it now. Actually, I don't know if you've seen them, but in Australia, I think it's Australia, they're now printing it on the cigarettes. So it's actually, as you smoke the cigarette on the filter, it says, this causes cancer, or this smoking causes impotence. So as you smoke it, it's actually there on the cigarette, and which I think is very clever. It's good psychology. That would definitely made me not think about coolness if I was to sit there and smoke one. But anyway, but the point here is, it was a part of you that's running that. There is a part of you that also knows that smoking is going to cause cancer, or that everybody that you work with is going to be quite friendly when you go on the team night out, or that you've got your first wedding anniversary, Brian, you should really go home, or maybe this relationship might be okay. but it's the other part of us. And this idea of internal conflict that people think, therefore, they're against themselves, when actually, as we both know and are fortunate enough to be able to teach people, this idea is actually that both parts are more than likely after the same thing. They're just going about it in two totally different ways.
Yeah, and I think that moves us nicely along to looking at solutions, doesn't it? I mean, I think what you're touching on there is, if you're looking to resolve self-sabotage, you really need to resolve that inner conflict that's going on beneath the surface, the conflict between these two parts that are after good things for yourself. And I think ultimately what you're looking to do is you're looking to almost like kind of pan the camera back and find a space where these seemingly two opposing forces can actually coexist. So if we take, I guess, the example of me being in a relationship, you know, I have to find a way where you can be in a relationship where there's a certain amount of connection and freedom.
Yep.
And I'm not talking about being in a polyamorous relationship or anything like that. Even though if that's your thing, then
that's what you're into,
then go for it. But you know, there's different types of relationships.
Absolutely.
You know, for me, the belief I had was that a relationship had to be, you are fully connected and you have to basically lose your freedom and follow that person around. And that totally freaks me out, by the way. I wouldn't want that. But actually, you know, in the modern day, we can have many different types of relationships. You can still have your own stuff going on. You can do your own shit, you know, and then you can share experiences together. So you're not like codependent on each other. So I think for me, that was the big revelation, or the big realization, was that actually these two can coexist in some form. So I think, and I guess when you realise that, that's when these opposing forces don't fight each other anymore. I'm not sure how that would have worked with your bevy session down the town, but well, maybe you can.
That leads on. I think that leads us on beautifully, though, to the other side of that. So I think that, especially in your situation there, when you talked about that connection freedom, finding a way to get both is absolutely perfect. For me, what I needed to do in mine was actually to realise the roots of what it was that were going on. That was all based on childlike behaviour. It was very childlike. It was like, you know, even though at that point I was in my 30s, that Brian that was in that pub singing those songs, and this is absolutely okay, by the way, that was childlike. That's the way I would describe him. That was teenage me getting therapy. That was teenage me going, look, I'm part of it. I belong. I'm accepted here, because I didn't necessarily feel that when I was 13, 14, 15. So that resolving that part of my life, which actually was done through a lot of kind of self-reflection and stuff, but also done through therapy, was just a huge thing that began to change that. There was also a huge realisation on the priority of things. You know, I still say that day was, there was a decision that needed to be made. I needed to make a decision about priorities. That wasn't therapy. That was about me. And even to this day, so I'm now early 50s, somewhere about there. So that's now 20 years. It'll be 21 years this year since that happened. And I still will not drink more than 2 pints of lager on a night out because of that night out, because I know what happens next. So I cut it, I control it, I manage it. I don't drink as much as I used to at all, because the priorities shifted. But I think there was also a key there for me when I tell that wee story about the person being judged going into that staff party thing. I quite often then will rewind the story back to this imagined thing that happened to them in school, where they felt as if they were judged or out of it. You know, they were bullied or something like that, and that being the key. So yeah, find balance if you can, but also look back, and also look into the past to think, where did this come from? Because you've not been born like this.
Yeah.
You've been taught this.
It's really interesting. And I think as well, it's about appreciating that there's other ways to be accepted and have that sense of belonging that don't involve getting completely smashed.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
It's like you don't, that's only one way, and it's not a particularly healthy way. Yeah. Especially with if you want to keep your marriage beyond. It wasn't
long-term sustainable. Now I'm much more likely, actually, if I'm going out with someone, to say, do you want to go for breakfast? Yeah. That's my thing now, is do you want to go for breakfast? Now, I mean, I only have 7 pints at breakfast. No,
that's okay. That's fine, because you've got plenty of time to sober up, so it's okay.
Exactly.
No, it's true. And there's lots of different ways for you to get that acceptance, to get that sense of belonging
exactly
that don't involve getting smashed. And actually, there's even an argument to say that you don't necessarily have to really do anything to get that sense of connection, to get that sense of belonging. It could be one of your default states, I guess. There is that argument. And I loved what you said there about, doing some self-reflection, doing some investigation. I think a lot of people, we all have different strategies for dealing with problems, especially self-sabotaging, destructive behaviours or emotions. And I think the first one is we tend to hide. We pretend they're not there. So we're like, we just kind of, no, it's fine, it's okay, I've not got a problem here. I'll just distract myself. Or we sometimes try and fight even further. So we try and fight fire with fire, and we end up in this weird internal conversation. The stakes get higher and actually ends up adding extra layers to the problems. But I think the key thing is definitely to just take a deep breath, hand the camera back, and just do a bit of honest exploration. I've got a metaphor. It's a story. You're going to love this one.
What a way to finish an episode. Well, go on, a Steve story.
Well, the last episode, there was a Taoist farmer.
Taoist farmer, you remember him.
You remember him? So this one's actually not quite as highbrow as that. Okay. This is Scooby-Doo.
All right, I'm going to say it.
We've gone from Taoist farmer to Scooby-Doo. But when I was younger, so Scooby-Doo was my all-time favourite cartoon when I was younger. I would never miss an episode. But then pretty soon I realised that every episode was pretty much the same. I had a very familiar, predictable structure. That the gang, the mystery machine would roll into town, and the whole town, the whole village would be being terrorised by this unbelievably horrific, ghastly ghoul. And of course, each of them had different strategies for dealing with the ghoul. Up first, we had Scooby Shaggy. Scooby Shaggy? Do you want to do your impression?
No, I'm definitely not going
like
there.
Shaggy, actually. Now,
come on. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll wear the green t-shirt and the kind of khaki pants the next time,
That thought has never occurred to me. I don't know why that's never occurred to me, but you're a dead ringer for Shaggy. Anyway, a much more handsome version
Thank you.
Shaggy.
You saved that.
The more masculine version of Shaggy. And so up first, they tried to deal with the ghoul. And I don't know if you can remember what their strategy was.
Generally run about and try and look for food.
Run away, run away and hide. And if there's food there, that's even better.
Absolutely.
And again, this is sometimes what we do when we're faced with some sort of destructive behaviour or unpleasant emotion. But the funny thing was, I don't know if you can remember much of a Scooby-Doo episode, but they would like hide in a cupboard or they'd hide under the bed, and lo and behold, the monster would be in the cupboard behind them, or they would just end up inviting the monster even more. And that's the thing, isn't it? I think we can hide for a certain period of time, but eventually these problems are going to bite us in the ass. They're going to come up from behind us. But then up next was of course Scrappy-Doo, and I don't know if you can remember what.
People seem to have a real thing against Scrappy-Doo. I didn't like him at all.
There's a reason why I hate Scrappy-Doo, because I got bit by a what kind of dog is it?
They're Great Danes.
No, that's Scooby-Doo's.
Scooby-Doo's a Great Dane.
Scrappy-Doo's the wee small one.
Oh, yeah. So what was he? I thought he was. Jack Russell. Okay.
So I got bit by a Jack Russell with one eye when I was in Germany about 5 years ago. So I'll tell you that story later on.
That's for another podcast episode. We can start with that one.
So of course, his strategy was just to fight. He was going to kill the monster.
No plan. Just
absolutely no plan. He was just going to take the monster out. Yeah. But of course, that didn't work, because Scrappy-Doo was just this wee midget of a dog. And as well, when we try to fight these forces, these destructive behaviours and emotions, it never really works, does it? Because we're actually fighting with a part of ourselves.
Exactly.
So we end up creating more conflict. Maybe a good lesson for life as well in politics. When we fight, we create more conflict in the long run. But the way round it, and this is what they always did in Scooby-Doo, was they investigated. They worked from the premise that maybe this is not a monster at all. It's not a ghoul. And they pieced together the clues, and eventually they figured out what was going on. And of course, every episode of Scooby-Doo ended the same way.
Yep, the mask get taken off. Is there not one when something else happens?
What?
I think there is
Seriously?
one episode where something else happens, but yes, normally it is just the janitor.
It's the janitor. It's the farmer.
The mayor.
It's the farmer. It's maybe the
Taoist farmer. That's maybe the next bit of the story.
And of course they finish with the famous line. I would have got away with it if it wasn't for you kids.
Yep.
But the thing is that the villain is never a villain at all. It's just like, it's not a ghoul. It's not a monster. It's just a former upstanding member of the community that's become a little bit twisted, a little bit distorted over time. And I think that's a really good analogy for our self-sabotaging behaviours and our destructive emotions. You know, they start off with good intentions, but they end up becoming a bit distorted over time, and we then demonise them. And the way around it is to investigate, to do that. That was a very long-winded way of saying, but I think you did the right thing back then.
Well, I'm going to summarise that and say that I think, therefore, Stephen Bryan's message from this episode is be more Velma. It is basically, I don't know if you want to be Daphne or, I've forgotten the other name.
Oh, Daphne was the red hair?
Yes, Velma was
Thelma was the small one.
Velma was the small one with the glasses.
With the
but she was always really
one.
clever and really intelligent. Fred, that was who it was.
Blonde one that didn't really do much.
That was Daphne. And then Fred was the
Daphne?
kind of preppy, kind of like jock.
Right.
Anyway, be more Velma. This is
Interesting.
mental health advice from Stephen Bryan. Be more Velma.
Yeah, top quality content here.
Exactly.
A deep dive into Scooby-Doo.
We're learning much about each of us as these podcast episodes continue.
Indeed. So I think that's us for this episode. I think we've been chatting for long enough.
Absolutely.
And I think we pulled that together quite nicely. So great conversation again. I'm away for a fag and a few beers. No, I'm definitely not going to do that. And I'm going to do some self-reflection.
Absolutely.
On some self-sabotaging stuff that's going on. Indeed. So thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are watching on YouTube, if you could like and subscribe and pop a comment below and let us know what you think.
If you're listening to us on audio, then please follow us. And also, if you can, please give us a 5-star review and tell us how much you've enjoyed it, because it really helps us reach more people.